Hayley McGoldrick joins us, writer at sportsnet.ca. We talked before the tournament. We were full of excitement and joy and anticipation. And now we talk at the end of the tournament for Team Canada. How did they get here?
Oh, it's just really sad to watch, honestly, because it's a culmination of so many things. And a lot of it is obviously the Canada soccer business looming over everything, because this team only had 4 friendlies before coming here. 3 of them they were pretty much forced into because the Federation said they were going to sue them if they didn't play. They didn't get a send-off game like many other teams did. And they had that looming the entire time as much as they came to a tentative deal. That's obviously physically and mentally, of course, mostly mental, but physically as well, exhausting to deal with. And then, of course, you have the tactics, the formations, the selections that were all somewhat iffy. Sometimes you thought, why isn't Evelyn Vienne starting? Why isn't Chloe Lacasse starting? Things like that. And just in that Australia game, it was sad to watch because you looked at that Ireland game and it looked like they'd kind of figured it out. Nigeria game, there was no attack, didn't know what they were doing, really lost it there without Jessie Fleming. You come into the Ireland game, it wasn't even Jessie Fleming who was the difference. It was Sophie Schmidt off the bench. We found a bit of that attack. Ailish, your close personal friend Adriana Leon with that game winner. And then today it just looked like there was nothing. They didn't even have a shot on target in the first half. They really struggled to beat that defensive block, which they've struggled with all tournament. They couldn't break down the defense, and also just letting Australia run all over them. And they didn't even have Sam Kerr, and that was the big thing. Oh, Sam Kerr might be playing. They didn't even need Sam Kerr. Haley Rosso ran all over them. Steph Catley from the spot has been automatic in both Australia's game against Ireland and Canada, and it was just really sad to watch because it looked like they just had no fight in them. And it's hard to see from not only, yes, Olympic champions, which is in the whole thing, but just a team that has the depth and talent. It looked like they didn't really have either out there today.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned Sam Kerr. Like, we're watching the game, we've got it up while we're doing it, and it felt like she was like the shark in Jaws. It's like they just kept giving you a glimpse of her on the broadcast. Like, at any moment, if this gets close, she's lurking and waiting. You know, in terms of the problems facing the Federation, let's face it, you know, I'm sure you've been asked this question. I'm sure you've attempted to answer it many times. And the reason I say attempt is because there isn't a simple one. But if a federation that has the greatest player in its history, in Christine Sinclair, and forget its history, like among the game's greatest, if it is Olympic champs less than 2 years removed, and we still can't figure it out, what is the roadmap for straightening out Canada soccer? And I know this is an issue that has been echoed on the men's side as well, and they don't even have the success that the women's team has shown to back it up. I mean, if we can't fix this for Olympic champs and for one of the true greats of the game, how does this get fixed going forward?
No, you're absolutely right. And it's hard because there is no clear answer, because it feels like it's this cycle of there's not the support needed and there's a crumbling youth system, so we're not getting the same talent coming up through Canada, but then you're not getting the results. And then in the Federation's eyes and things like that, they think, well, we're not going to give you all this money if you're not getting the results, if you haven't had your best performance at a World Cup since 2003, 20 years ago. And it's just this vicious cycle that it feels like Canada is stuck in. And I think obviously the answer seems simple, just pay them. But I know that it doesn't just work like that. And then they look at this result and say, well, you won one game 2-1, you drew another, and you lost another. And so that's not good enough to be able to be demanding all these things. And they're not demanding a lot. They're just demanding equity and being paid what they deserve to be one of the best teams. And it's just really, again, it is sad to see because it seems like there's no way out of it because it's just a vicious cycle. And it's something that this team has been dealing with since their inception. The original Canadian women's soccer team didn't play for 2 years because they didn't qualify for a World Cup. And the Federation said, well, we don't really see anything worth investing because you didn't qualify for a World Cup. And so not having that preparation has bit them once again, and now it just is stuck in this cycle of, well, is that Olympic success going to be the peak of what this program is? And I know that's not true, and there is so much talent in the youth. Olivia Smith made her World Cup debut today, and she had a good showing, and there's a lot of young players who are going to come up and replace Christine Sinclair's and the Sophie Schmidts of the world, but people just look at results and think, okay, well, you didn't perform at a World Cup, so you're not deserving of it, which is just harsh and unfair.
Before we ask about the big questions of if this was individuals' last appearances for Team Canada. Let's go through the game that they needed to win and did the complete opposite. Steamrolled by Australia, who also needed to win that host nation. It seems like each of the three games, slow starts were a major problem for Canada. Like the right lineup seemed to elude them, whether the decision making from the coach in the trickle effect downwards just didn't seem to click. Why the slow starts, getting down another early loss here to Australia, and obviously we saw their comeback and their one win, but were the lineups part of the major collapse of Canada?
Oh, absolutely. We've seen it since the game in Nigeria. They needed some sort of attack. They needed some sort of energy and threatening presence in the front. And it seemed like the selections didn't have that. And then you're hoping for something off the bench. It worked against Ireland when Sophie Schmidt came off the bench and she wasn't afraid of challenges and getting in there. And she's the one who assisted that Adriana Leon goal. But today there was just absolutely nothing. And even defensively, it looks like they were just lacking the energy and that tenacity as well, and just letting Australia walk right through them. And so that's definitely on the lineups and the tactics as well, because you have the same players who are starting every single game. Well, you really have nothing to lose at this point. It's a do or die game. Why not change the lineup? Why not change the formations? Because if you lose this game, you're going home, which is, like you said, exactly what happened. It wasn't even a close loss. It was a little bit pathetic to watch because it just looked like they had no energy. They were lifeless out there. And that's not what we know of this Canadian soccer team. We know what they're capable of. And so the fact that there's some players, like I said, like a Chloe Lacasse, who she had an incredible season at Benfica, 35 golden assists combined. She was player of the year in Portugal. Why not let her start? What do you have to lose at this point? Genuinely nothing. And they lost anyway. So I think that that's a big thing too. And yes, there are some players who might not be around next World Cup, so it'll have to be different. And I get maybe because this might have been their last game, it was an ode to starting players and whatnot. But when it's a do or die game, you can't have that sentiment or trying to go with what you know. You might as well change it up because nothing else has worked this far.
Ugh, so we're watching the game live, but on mute. So we, because we kind of have to talk on the radio and focus. But it seemed like there's a lot of VAR, a lot of weird calls, something that looked offside that wasn't offside. Obviously, this score being 4-0 shows pretty much how it was. But was it officiated well? Were there any calls that maybe Canada could have got differently that might have changed the outcome, or simply just outplayed in the way soccer goes?
I think it is a little bit like obviously getting that penalty kick there at the end was just kind of like a kick in the butt. Like you're already down. You're already down 3-0, and now you're going to be down 4-0 in a game that you're already losing. It's injury time, like things like that. But I think in any kind of game, there are going to be weird calls, and women's soccer especially is so physical. They play so tough, and sometimes you just kind of want to let them play. Like there was one point where I think Ailish Chapman hit somebody, and she ran into her, and Ailish Chapman, you could like see her mouth being like, she jumped into me. Like that's just kind of the way that women's soccer is. They're super physical, and some of the calls are just like, A, let them play, and B, that's not really a foul. It's an incident of what happens when you play tough in the game. But at the end of the day, even if some of those calls I think had swung Canada's way, there was just no energy from them. Even if they weren't getting, if they did get the calls, it doesn't change the fact that they didn't have what it took to really win that game regardless. So yes, there were a few calls that definitely could have swung the other way, because what even were they, like you said? But I don't think it would change the outcome of the game just because of what Canada really lacked bringing into this game.
So I know we've kind of talked about this throughout the entirety of this interview, Hayley, but if you could just kind of put a little bit of a finer point on it for me. I mean, I don't want to sit here and do a kind of blame pie. Who's at 20%? Who's at what this percentage? But how much can you kind of, and again, take the players off the hook is far too strong of a term. But given all of the problems going on behind the scenes with Canada soccer, like how much is this the players and the coach and the tactics versus all of the headaches that led to it? Like, is there a reason to believe that a team with better tactics or a team with better players could have overcome all of the problems that they've had with the Federation? Or do you think that the problems with the Federation are kind of kneecapping for just about any group?
I think if I did have to make a blame pie, it kind of is a bit about 50-50, because having to deal with something as traumatic and long drawn out and just fighting for what you deserve, like I said, is so mentally and also even physically exhausting. But at the end of the day, it does fall onto the players. on the pitch, because as much as they're dealing with that and they didn't have the preparation that other countries got, they're still world-class players. They're still players who, a lot of them play in the NWSL, but they have experience in Europe. They're really talented, and you have what it takes to be able to win against pretty much everybody. We've seen them beat the likes of the United States, who are one of the clear favorites looking now, especially into the round of 16. But and same with the coach. You're the one who's putting that lineup out onto the field, and you're the one making those substitutions. So I like Bev, but I think that she could have made so many smarter decisions when it came to this team, because there were just some players who weren't bringing the energy, and they continued to get those starting positions, and they weren't bringing the attack that was needed. And so, yes, it's very exhausting to have to deal with something like the Canadian women's soccer team has with Canada Soccer, but when you're up there, when you're NWSL champions, when you're European champions, you have what it takes to be able to win a game. And out there, it looked like they just had no chemistry, no energy, nothing. And they have to take a bit of the blame for that, because at the end of the day, that's the product that they put onto the field when they needed to win a game, and it looked like they didn't even want to be there.
Talking to Hayley McGoldrick, writer at Sportsnet.ca, been covering the Women's World Cup, and Canada's campaign has come to an end, and so has Sophie Schmidt's career with the Canadian Women's National Team, saying that will be retiring and playing her final game there. That came out just as we were getting the final post-game interview. So Sophie Schmidt, I believe that was her 224th cap in a Canada shirt. Obviously, the main question is going to be like her legacy on this, and she said she hopes that she left the game of football in a better place in Canada, and she certainly did. Sophie Schmidt being on her way out, what does that do to the team, the dynamic, the leadership of Canada Soccer?
It's huge to lose a player like Sophie Schmidt. As we'd said before, she was the difference in that Ireland game. She came on. She wasn't afraid of anything. She assisted that goal. She was the reason that there was some sort of attack and energy in that game, because they lacked it against Nigeria as well. But she's just been part of this whole journey from Canada not really being a women's soccer country. They were a little bit, they were up there, but it was always living in the United States shadow. And then you go to the London 2012 Olympics and you win bronze. And then you go to Rio and you win bronze again, which at this point is not good enough, which is crazy because so many countries would kill to be on that podium. And now Canada Soccer has become such a reputable program that they're not happy winning bronze. And then you're an Olympic champion in Tokyo, and coming into this, and obviously this is a sad exit, not only because they didn't progress to the knockouts, but just the way they went out as well. But she's not only such a leader and been through so much through this program, but what she brings onto the pitch as well, that veteran presence on the pitch and not being afraid of anything, in that energy and intensity, because it seems like Canada had lacked a lot of that, especially in this World Cup. They didn't really have anything going for them offensively, it seemed. So it's huge to lose her, and she does definitely leave a legacy. And we obviously talk about Christine Sinclair so much for good reason, but a player like Sophie Schmidt deserves her flowers as well, because she's been such a huge part of this program.
Yeah, maybe not the worst idea on her part to get ahead of that news, because if Christine says what we think she might say, then it could get dwarfed a little bit, and it shouldn't be the case at all. Hayley, really, really appreciated the chat, and I know we all would have liked it to have had a little bit of a different tenor, but really appreciated you jumping on with us this morning.
Of course. Thanks so much for having me.
There she goes. Hayley McGoldrick, writer, Sportsnet.ca.